Well, good morning and welcome, everyone. This is Jim Brett of the New England Council. I hope that all of you and your loved ones and your colleagues remain safe and healthy during this challenging time. I want to thank those of you who joined us last week for our first Capitol Hill Report virtual event with Congressman Richie Neal, Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. We had nearly 300 people participate and heard great feedback. So we're looking forward to keeping these series going on in the next couple of weeks. We hope these virtual events will give our members the opportunity to hear from members of Congress when we're unable to really connect in person. In addition to today's program, we're looking forward to hosting Congresswoman Lori Trahan on Monday, April 13th, and on the following day, Senator Jeanne Shaheen. Today, we're honored to welcome a good friend, Senator Ed Markey. Well, you may know he's the Bay State's junior senator, first elected to the United States Senate in 2012. He's one of the longest-serving members of the New England delegation, having previously served for over 35 years in the House of Representatives. He's a member of the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, the Environment and the Public Works Committee, the Foreign Relations Committee, and the Small Business Committee. I said this when I introduced the senator on his own town hall last week, and I'll say it again today. I have known and worked with the senator for many years, and the one thing that I have learned about Ed Markey is that he is one of the most well-liked and well-respected people on Capitol Hill, and he has developed an excellent relationship with leaders on both sides of the aisle from across the country. And all of us in New England are the beneficiaries of those strong working relationships because they enable the senator to build important alliances to advance legislation on critical issues for our region. And that includes everything from promoting research and innovation to safeguarding consumers to protection of our environment. In recent weeks, Senator Markey, along with all of his colleagues in the New England delegation, have worked tirelessly to enact now 3 pieces of major legislation aimed at combating this pandemic, supporting our healthcare sector and bolstering our economy. And as all of you know, 2 weeks ago, Congress passed and the President signed the CARES Act, the third COVID-19 relief package that will provide $2 trillion of relief and economic stimulus to various important sectors of our economy. The senator will tell us a little more about what is included in the CARES Act and what it may mean for going forward in a future relief package. And then I'm going to ask him some of the questions that many of you have already submitted. And I would note that because of the large number of participants in this event, we're not able to take live questions, but we have some great submissions from some of our members. With that, I'm very pleased again that the senator has taken time out of his very busy schedule and to hand it over to him now. The Honorable Senator Ed Markey.
Hey, Jim, thank you so much. And thank you for organizing this. This is, this is the new world that we're living in. And so I want to thank everyone for tuning in, for clicking in, for streaming in, because our usual face-to-face links are being replaced by Zoom links in our inboxes. We're all becoming basically the techies that Massachusetts really produces in mass quantity, and now the whole country is going to be just like us. So, and thank you, Jim Brett. Thank you, as usual, for your tremendous leadership. You're the kind of the centerpiece for our business organizational efforts in Massachusetts and across all of New England. And I can't thank you enough, my friend, for that incredible leadership which you do provide, and for your great friendship as well. You're just a very special person, and we all know that in this time, how you are an organizing principle, maybe the organizing principle, to make sure that everyone continues to talk to each other. So thank you so much. And it is good to be here today to remind one another that we're all connected, that our economy, our health, our very lives are all interconnected. And we know that these connections fuel our work, and in challenging times, those connections remind us of our shared responsibility to one another. It's good to see the Massachusetts business community coming together, and I pledge my partnership in that effort. And again, we thank you, Jim, for leading us. You've already joined me on one of the telephone conference calls I've been holding with the state small businesses, and now more than ever, we are so grateful to your leadership. So I wanted to first extend a personal thanks to each of you. I know so many of you are making big sacrifices, quarantining, postponing, canceling major events, dealing with potential layoffs, furloughs, as well as personal family challenges. And I'm so grateful to everyone's for the efforts that you're making. Right now, our primary goal needs to be to slow the spread of this virus, and we're all committed to that goal. We will flatten the curve, but we will not let this healthcare crisis forever flatten our New England economy. Right now, Massachusetts needs help, Massachusetts workers, Massachusetts families, Massachusetts businesses, and I know that because on just one day, last week, my Boston office received 700 telephone calls. Just one day last week. 700 people who have questions and they need answers. And that's why I wanted to spend this time talking about the efforts of Congress to get you the relief you need as you face this unprecedented moment. So the Congress stepped up and we passed an unprecedented economic relief package, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or the CARES Act. And it's an historic $2.2 trillion legislative package that's meant to help our workers, our families, our businesses survive this devastating moment. The legislation is far from perfect, but our economy is desperate for help right now, and the resources in this package will support countless Americans. Democrats fought tooth and nail. The Massachusetts delegation stood together. Senator Warren and I and our whole delegation, led by Richie Neal, but our whole delegation partnered so that we would work hard to be successful in securing worker retention protections, larger direct payments to families, expanded small business relief, support for our beleaguered hospitals, and more resources for our universities and our cities and our states. The package is massive, it is historic, but we're not going to, that's not going to be the last word on an economic relief package. Congress is going to have to return. We're going to have a huge, major additional phase 4 bill that we're going to be working on that will include even more relief. But in the interim, there's another package which we are also working on. Mitch McConnell and Marco Rubio wanted, as of yesterday, to have an additional $250 billion go into the already massive $350 billion relief for small businesses. So they want to add $250 billion more, and they want to do it by unanimous consent this week. So what Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and all of the Democrats are saying with one voice is that we do have to provide additional relief for small businesses and families, that we do have to build on that strong down payment, but we should have additional provisions in it. So here's what we're saying. We're saying that it should have $250 billion in new assistance on top of the CARES Act to small businesses, with $125 billion of that money channeled through community-based financial institutions that serve farmers, family, women, minority, and veteran-owned small businesses and nonprofits in the rural part of our country, tribal, suburban, and urban communities across our country. and improvements to ensure all eligible small businesses can access this critical funding and are not turned away by banks, meaning that we have to ensure that those smaller players, that the women, the minorities, the veteran-owned businesses, family-owned businesses, all get a fair share of this money, so that it's not all allocated to the largest of the small businesses, because obviously a small business under our law will cover those up to 500 employees. We want to make sure that those that only have 5, 10, 25, 50 people get their fair share of this. So we're making that very clear. In addition, the Democrats are saying that we want to add $100 billion for hospitals, for community health centers, and for health systems, providing desperately needed resources to the front lines of this crisis, including production and distribution of national rapid testing and personal protective equipment. So we want to add $100 billion more for hospitals and community health centers, and to do so immediately. We also want to add $150 billion for state and local governments to manage this crisis and mitigate lost revenue, which doubles down on the investment that we already put into the CARES Act. So we know that our cities are cash strapped. We know that the state is spending a lot of money to make it possible for us to make it through this crisis. So we want to add another $150 billion as part of any package that we move right now in the interim before we move to a bigger fourth package. And in addition, we want to add more support for families and add a 15% increase to the maximum SNAP, the maximum food stamp program to help put food on the table. So we want a 15% increase in that benefit as well. So after we pass this interim emergency legislation, Congress then has to move on to a new CARES package, a CARES 2 package, which will provide transformational relief as the American people weather this assault on their lives and their livelihoods. So that's all happening right now as we speak, trying to work out this interim package because the amount of money, especially for small businesses, but for cities, for community health centers, for hospitals, is being drained very quickly, and we know that we have to infuse more funding, but we also have to ensure that we are taking care of the smallest of the small businesses. So with regard to the package as it exists right now, before we amend it and put more money in, but the framework will stay pretty much the same. We've got about 700,000 small businesses across the Commonwealth. The small businesses are an engine of our economy. If they don't run, the economy doesn't run. And our job is to make sure that they get these resources now to protect their workers, to pay them rent, to pay the bills, to cover their loans, and ensure that they can weather this economic and health emergency. So the relief package provides billions of dollars in important relief to keep small businesses afloat during this crisis. And there are three major components for small business assistance: $350 billion in loan forgiveness grants to small businesses and nonprofits to maintain existing workforce and help pay for other expenses like rent, mortgage, and utilities. So this money can be used pretty much in any way that a small business wants to, as long as the business maintains its existing workforce, and then it just turns into a grant, forgiven. No loan needs to be repaid, just a grant. Then there's a second program of $10 billion for SBA emergency grants of up to $10,000 to provide immediate relief for small business operating costs. Again, you can apply immediately for the $10 billion. You can receive $10,000 immediately to help keep your small business afloat. And again, that's forgiven. That's not a loan, that's a grant. And finally, there's a $17 billion program for SBA to cover 6 months of payments for small businesses with existing SBA loans. So if you're already in the SBA system, you can receive upwards of $17 billion. Apply for that program to cover 6 months of your payments right now. And again, that's on an emergency basis as well. So do you need capital to cover the cost of retaining your employees? Then the Paycheck Protection Program is probably right for you. Do you need a quick infusion of a smaller amount of cash to cover you right now? You might want to look for an emergency economic injury grant. That's the $10,000 you can receive immediately. Are you looking to ease your fears about keeping up with payments on your current or potential SBA loan? The Small Business Debt Relief Program can help you, and it can do so immediately. And if you need quality free counseling to help you navigate this uncertain economic time, that help is available through the Small Business Administration. You can call my office. We will help you to connect in so that you can get the expert advice immediately. I also worked with Elizabeth Warren and our delegation. I went to Senator Sullivan and Senator Murkowski of Alaska, and I said to them that we need help with our fishing industry. We have, along with Alaska, we're the largest by capital fishing states in the union. So we fought together, 2 Democrats from Alaska, Democrats from Massachusetts, and we included $300 million in the package to help fishermen in Massachusetts and around the country. And that's going to be there. And again, we will relook at that as well if the funding turns out to be inadequate. We have to keep everyone afloat until this healthcare crisis is over. So the strength of our minority-led and women-led businesses and the businesses of our underserved communities are vital to our economy. So we have to do everything we can to reach out into those communities and actively connect them with the resources they need to make it through this crisis. We can't afford to allow a healthcare crisis to perpetuate a crisis of inequality. We're seeing that in terms of the larger number by far of African Americans and other minorities who are being impacted by this pandemic. So my office is here to help owners and workers navigate the federal support available at this time. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And we know that our hospitals and our healthcare industry are the lifeblood of our economy in Massachusetts. Its workers and staff are doing God's work right now, and truly we can't let them down. So on day one, after talking to our hospitals just 2.5 weeks ago, I went immediately to Chuck Schumer, to our leadership, to say that we have to include a huge amount of money to help our hospitals, including the smaller community hospitals that could easily face bankruptcy due to collapsing revenues and strained resources. So the first package includes more than $150 billion to stabilize our healthcare system during this crisis. And the proposal which the Democrats are making today is to add another $100 billion so that we can deal with this crisis that the hospital system of our country are feeling. So the good news is that the first $30 billion in federal aid is going to be on the way to healthcare providers within days. Much of that is going to go to hospitals. The CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, is fast-tracking another $34 billion in loans. That money will be used to help offset lost businesses as health providers postpone elective surgeries and keep beds empty in anticipation of a surge of coronavirus patients. So we cannot and we must not forget our safety net hospitals. So I'm pleased to announce that the Department of Health and Human Services has awarded community health centers in Massachusetts more than $36 million to assist in combating the coronavirus outbreak. The these community health centers are right in the front lines of fighting, back this epidemic. And so we know that so many of our healthcare centers are the only access that people in Massachusetts have for healthcare, and that funding is going to help to ensure that that is the social safety net that is there for all of them. And we're going to push hard to make sure that we put more funding in right now in negotiations with the Republicans, and then we put more in later as well. We know that the health emergency has led to a transportation crisis, and not the usual runs around the pike traffic or red line delays. We're reading about 76% drop in airline traffic at Logan Airport, and due to lower passenger demand, Massport has closed the economy parking garage. Our transportation sectors and its workers are hurting. So fortunately, this legislation includes $10 billion for airports such as Logan and Nantucket Memorial, and I fought hard for that so that these essential hubs of travel can continue to keep their facilities operational, safe, and secure. The CARES Act also includes $25 billion in payroll grants for keeping airline workers on the job, and $3 billion in payroll grants for airline and airport contract workers. So we want to keep those airline workers going. The package includes $1 billion for Amtrak, a vital artery for all of us in Massachusetts and all of New England. And we also worked hard to secure $25 billion for public transportation agencies, with just under $1 billion of that going to go to Massachusetts specifically to help allow families and workers to return to work and school after the crisis, while also preserving good paying jobs on the system. We'll be able to support the MBTA, but also fund Springfield, Worcester, and other regions of the state. And I also want to say a special thank you to our colleges and universities, which were some of our first institutions to react swiftly and decisively in the face of this pandemic. And so Senator Warren and I worked hard to urge immediate stopgap funding to prevent colleges and universities in Massachusetts from raising tuition costs or laying off workers. So what this bill does is it provides funding for these educational institutions, but we have to continue fighting for additional financial support for our institutions of higher education. So under the bill, Massachusetts colleges and universities will receive $275 million just for Massachusetts colleges and universities through direct grants to institutions of higher education. We expect this money to arrive within the next couple of weeks, and you should receive information from the Department of Education about your institution's specific allocation. And again, if you need help, please call. And while there is a separate fund for K-12 needs, Governor Baker will also receive $51 million for the governor's emergency education relief fund, which he can spend on higher education needs in the Commonwealth. And he can also spend that money on early education and elementary and secondary education as well. I am the author of the E-rate. That's the law which actually helps to pay for computers on the desks of the poorest kids in Massachusetts and around the country. It's already spent over $54 billion. Now, however, we have to move it to the living room, to the bedrooms, to the kitchens of families in our country, because we don't want a homework gap to open up between the kids who come from more well-to-do families and the poorest kids. So what I'm calling for is $2 billion in the E-rate program, the education rate program administered by the FCC, to be spent on discounts for schools seeking to loan Wi-Fi hotspots to students who do not have internet at home, as well as those trying to equip school distributed devices with Wi-Fi capability. that can be lent out while physical classes are on hold. We're already reading stories about kids who are having a hard time at home in terms of them keeping up with these educational programs. And so I think this is absolutely critical that we not allow a homework gap to open. It could be devastating to kids in terms of their long-term educational opportunities. So we just have to make sure that while people might be physically divided, that we cannot allow it to digitally divide our students based upon income. And I am working very hard to make sure that we fund that program. And moving on, we know that the states and cities are bearing the burden of the response effort right now, and the relief package provides some resources to stay afloat. It includes community development block grants, programs of $60 million here in Massachusetts, emergency solutions grants to address homelessness, $30 million we get in Massachusetts, an estimated $2.6 billion to Massachusetts from the Coronavirus Relief Fund. And in addition, there's an election security funding of $8.3 million to help ensure that we do not neglect the democratic process even as we fight this war. So there's many more lines that are in this budget as well that are lifelines for Massachusetts families. The unemployment provisions are very generous. We have added $600 per week to unemployment insurance. The average unemployment benefit in Massachusetts is $600 a week. So we are making it with the additional $600, $1,200 a week, all the way through the end of July to July 31st. But unemployment is extended out to 39 weeks in total. So through July 31st, everyone will, on average, get about $1,200 a week in unemployment. On top of that, each gets a $1,200 check per individual. So for a couple, it would be $2,400. If they have two kids, they get $500 a piece extra. So it would be $3,400 for a family of four on top of the unemployment benefit if they need it, all towards the goal of helping to keep the economy on a life raft and ready to go when we come out on the other end of this healthcare crisis. And finally, I might say that the president still has not invoked the Defense Production Act. He should have called upon him a month ago to do this, to secure, to distribute, to ramp up production of key medical supplies. The personal protective equipment is still in short supply. Nurses are being asked to reuse their masks or go without adequate protection. We're in bidding wars with other states. The national strategic stockpile is depleted. The president still refuses to just conscript private sector companies, tell them they'll be paid, but just mandate that they have to produce all of this equipment and to do so pronto. It happened in World War II. Ford Motor Company retooled and produced a bomber an hour in World War II. We're asking them to make N95 masks. We're asking them to make gowns. And the president still refuses to make that a mandate on our private sector. President Trump needs to tell the American people which companies are making the masks, the respirators, the ventilators, and the other protective gear. He needs to tell the American people how much equipment is being made. He needs to tell the American people where that equipment is going. We still don't have any transparency in terms of how the president or his team are handling these issues. So I just want to tell you my commitment is to protecting the businesses, the healthcare professionals, the consumers, the workers, the families of Massachusetts from the impacts of coronavirus. That's my number one priority. And I want you to know that I'm here for you and that I will help you during this emergency. This current moment may be distancing and isolating ourselves from one another. but we cannot and should not ever sever our connections to one another. We're all in this together. And I just really ask all of you to listen to the guidance of our scientists and our medical professionals for your families and for everyone else's family. It's unprecedented. We're going to require an unprecedented mobilization, but we will come out of this on the other side. So I thank you so much. And Jim, thank you for putting this together. Yeah, please.
Yeah, that's great. We just have time for a couple of questions, and you touched on many of them already. But first thing is I want to thank you for a very comprehensive outline of the rescue package, what it means to the Commonwealth, what it means to different sectors of our economy. And it was well done, and I think it was very, very helpful, to say the least. But you did indicate that Congress could move as early as this week to approve another $250 billion in aid in small business. So now we're up to almost $600 billion. My only concern is, do we have oversight material to make sure that all these funds are directed where they are needed most?
That's going to be the responsibility of the Congress. We have to make sure that there are strong guidelines here, and that's why the members of the Small Business Committee, Ben Cardin, the lead Democrat, and myself, and others. That's why we sent a letter to the SBA just yesterday, saying to them that we want to make sure that we have the strongest possible guidelines to make sure that everyone is able to benefit from this program. We don't want people to be left behind. We don't want there to be a situation where those who are more sophisticated are able to benefit, but that those who just don't have the lawyers, the accountants, et cetera, can't figure out how to navigate this process. So that's our goal. That's what we're trying to do. And if anybody who's on this call has any suggestions or any problems that they want to have us troubleshoot for them, please let us know immediately through Jim or through my office. I think it's absolutely imperative that we provide the strongest possible oversight.
Mm-hmm. Now, you indicated that there may be a Corona 4 coming down the road. You mentioned about $100 billion for hospitals, community health centers. You indicated $150 billion for state and local governments to manage this crisis. I think you also indicated a 15% increase in the SNAP benefits to help put food on the table. Do you see this being a bipartisan package going through the Senate?
Well, again, this is not the larger package. This is an interim package that is needed immediately. And our goal, of course, as Democrats, is we're trying our best to work on a bipartisan basis. So if you remember, 2 weeks ago, Mitch McConnell sent up his package without really consulting with Democrats, and we just voted no to allow that to proceed because we wanted more money that would be going in for hospitals, a stronger unemployment section, a stronger section on the food stamp section, portion of the bill. So this is a very fast-moving process that has just opened up yesterday, where McConnell proposed $250 billion more for small businesses. What we're saying is, let's do that on a short-term basis, but let's also make sure that at least a half of that is channeled through community-based and financial institutions that serve smaller family, women, minority, and veteran-owned. That we add and we're saying let's add $100 billion for hospitals and community health centers, and put in much more money for the personal protective equipment. And let's also infuse the state and local governments with $150 billion more. So we're saying, let's do that now. So that conversation is just opening up. We hope that we can resolve it very, very quickly so that we can pass out an interim package as we negotiate a bigger CARES 2 package that will follow on to the package we just passed 2 weeks. So this is just an interim reflecting the shortages we're hearing from the cities, from the states, from the hospitals, from the Small Business Administration in terms of the funding for those programs that we've already put on the books.
Okay. There was one topic that I didn't see mentioned in any of this outline of the stimulus bill, and that is infrastructure. The president indicated he'd like to see a $2 trillion infrastructure bill. The speaker indicated at one time she'd like to do an infrastructure bill, but I don't seem to hear too much about it now. Has someone just punted it off the table where we might address that later in the year, in the fall, or maybe next year? But at one time, this was a hot issue that it seemed like people were coming together to say, yeah, let's do the infrastructure, the road, the bridges, the highways. This would be the biggest jobs bill that Congress has done in decades. And all of a sudden, we seem to have taken that off the table. Have we?
No, it's not off the table. And
Okay.
and I'm on the infrastructure committee. So I serve on the infrastructure committee, and believe me, I've been waiting for 3.5 years for Donald Trump to finally propose his infrastructure bill. So the fact that he started talking about it again last week is good. It's the kind of proposal, again, we need details, that could put together a bipartisan package on infrastructure. We're going to need to have to put people back to work once it's safe to put people back out there again. There's nothing more bipartisan than an infrastructure bill. And we agree that we need more roads, more bridges, but we also want to make sure that we build out the broadband in our country. We need water projects. We need a massive amount of construction that we can do. So I will say this, Jim, I am very optimistic, very hopeful that we can put together a big, a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure bill. And that's going to be at the top of my list for an agenda, because we need it in Massachusetts. And it would really be a great way to help to jumpstart the economy.
Absolutely, absolutely. If I could just touch on a couple of different topics. You already touched on a few of them already, but education, colleges, needless to say, are so important to New England. Across New England, they're scrambling to close their deep budget holes, and some have been pushed to the brink of collapse. You read of one particular college that in the newspaper just recently. Since the virus outbreak has triggered financial losses that could total more than $100 million at some institutions. The $2 trillion rescue bill that was signed by the president has, I think, $14 billion in there for higher ed. And the American Council on Education and Association of College Presidents had requested some $50 billion. So do you think there'll be some good news coming for these colleges, because they are in desperate shape? And as you know, many of these smaller colleges, they're the largest employer in their cities and towns. So it would be a double whammy if they had to lay off and downscale some of their programs. So this is a very important issue for many of the colleges. And I'll just add, second part of the question is, Endicott College, the board president is also a board member of the New England Council, President DeSalvo. He indicated that he wanted to know if there's anything in the bill that would help the colleges like his, who are now opening up his campus to expose workers to reside in some of his residence halls. And he's also, believe it or not, preparing his ice arena to be used as a temporary morgue if needed. He's looking to see if there's something in the CARES Act or coming down the road that would give additional operating costs associated with these relief efforts. So is there any news for people like Endicott College and all the other colleges, public and private, in New England?
Well, first, as I said, there is $275 million just for Massachusetts colleges, which is in the CARES Act, 275. There is clearly a need for us to, in my opinion, to make sure that we fund relief for Endicott College and any of the other colleges and universities who are helping to fight the coronavirus. They should be compensated. They should be taken care of. The governor also received $51 million for his own discretionary spending, which he can spend on higher education needs in the Commonwealth if he wants, on top of the $275 million. And when we come back to do the larger second CARES package, believe me, higher education is going to be front and center on the table so that we can ensure that we continue to increase significantly the funding so that the universities, the colleges can stay afloat and come out solvent at the other end of this process. But thank you, Endicott, for everything that you're doing, and thank you for putting it on my radar, because I want to make sure that I focus on making sure you get the compensation you need for the contribution which you're making to help us to make it through this crisis.
Great. In the next package, do you think that Congress will consider support for larger non-profit, the non-profit human service agencies that are more than 500 employees that are being hit hard with decreased revenues and a dramatic increase in expenses, whether they be in supplies or equipment, as well as in wages and for direct support professionals? This is a big sector of our economy, is the non-profits. Will there be some good news coming in that area?
Well, as you point out, for nonprofits who have fewer than 500 employees, they're covered in the existing bill, and that's many of our most well-known and most valuable contributors to the fabric of Massachusetts, and they're all eligible to apply under the payroll protection plan. They can apply, and again, and many of them are in contacting my office. But I guess your question goes to those that have more than 500 employees. 500, right. And I think that you're right. I think we have to look at those as well, because they provide invaluable services to the Commonwealth, to the country, in the same way the universities and hospitals do. So I agree with you. We're going to have to put that out there front and center as well, to discuss whether or not we should be providing more help for the larger nonprofits as well. Thank you. The smaller ones, if you're listening, whatever, you do qualify right now, please apply because it's a grant that you will receive as long as you keep your employees on the payroll. It'll pay for your food. For your rent, for your electricity, for your bills. So please apply if you're under 500 in terms of the number of employees.
And do you see a likelihood of investment tax credits for offshore wind passing as part of this stimulus package?
I don't know what is in the mind of Donald Trump right now. He rolled back we know what's in his mind. Okay, he sees this as an opportunity for him, one, to roll back the fuel economy standards of the vehicles which we drive. Again, that's my 2007 law, which he is now revoking. He's rolling back. So instead of 54.5 miles per gallon by the year 2025, he's reducing it down to 40 miles per gallon. And that's all for the oil industry. He met with all the oil company executives in the Oval Office, socially distanced 6 feet apart, but you know what they were asking for from the oil industry to the president. He's relaxing pretty much every environmental law which he can, and he's doing so shamelessly. And inside of the other part of this bill, the larger $500 billion package, which I didn't mention in my comments. There, he wants complete unfettered ability to be able to do whatever he wants with it. And my fear is that he will use it as a way to bail out the oil industry. He's talking to Putin and Mohammed bin Salman. He's obsessed with saving the oil industry. So just a long way around of saying this. If he tries to do all that, believe me, the Democrats are going to be saying, we need help for the wind industry. We need help for the solar industry. We need help for the energy efficiency industry. We need help for the storage technology industries. We need help for all of the competitors to the oil industry. We just can't have this be a one-way street where the president gets to take care of all of his pollution pals and leave kind of the agenda, which goes right to the heart of economic development in Massachusetts with wind and solar and other technologies, kind of starving for financing. So that will be a huge battle, Jim, when we hit that next larger package.
Right. And many of our neighbors and friends who have been laid off or furloughed are struggling to pay their bills, including energy bills. While the utility companies have been incredibly understanding by agreeing not to disconnect customers during the crisis, one thing that would be helpful, I think, for many of those in our region who are struggling is an increase in the LIHEAP, the low-income heating assistance funding. I know there was money put in there in the stimulus bill, but do you see this as something that might be included in the next round as well, an additional relief?
Yeah, we put in a significant increase for low-income heating assistance in the first CARES bill, but it's going to have to continue. It's going to have to continue. It's going to have to be much larger. You know, obviously, we hope that this crisis ends quickly, but realistically, we know that it's going to take some time. So we have to make sure that people have the money in their pockets to pay their heating bills, to pay their air conditioning bills. They need to have that money. And in the same way we were able to fight hard to build in the money for low-income heating assistance in this last package, we will do the same thing in the next one. But thank you for flagging it, because it really goes to helping those who are most financially impacted by this crisis.
Right. The latest stimulus has been criticized for not funding rural and student broadband. Essentially, 100% of our students have just transitioned to online learning, and literally millions of people across the country are now working remotely. Bringing it home, Western Massachusetts has some rural areas and some places that don't have access to broadband. Are there any discussions about including funding for the E-rate program or rural broadband in the next stimulus?
Yeah, thank you. It's an excellent question. I touched upon it in my opening comments. Yeah, we have to expand, in my opinion, by a minimum of $2 billion, the funding that makes sure that kids have the internet at home. They're not going to be able to learn, and there is a homework gap. Like over 12 million poor kids in America right now do not have access to broadband at home. We have to close that gap and do so very quickly. The rural parts of America are particularly impacted because a lot of times the companies don't reach that final mile, you know, down the street where there aren't that many homes. So I think as part, at a minimum, of a large infrastructure bill, that we have a big broadband build out in the same way that West Virginia and Utah might need help in a broadband build out in rural. We have our own parts of Massachusetts, as you point out, Jim, in the western part of the state that has the same issue. And I'm partnering with Joe Manchin and partnering with Debbie Stabenow and partnering with Republicans, talking about how we can ensure that we do build out broadband out into the rural parts of our state, but across the whole country.
Well, those are the, I think we touched on the rescue package, something on healthcare, energy, broadband, non-profits. I think it was in higher ed. I think it was very comprehensive, 1 hour to have you on to talk about what is going on, what to anticipate in the future. I know you have a tight schedule. You have to be off in the next 2 minutes. If you'd like to just say in summary anything you'd like to members of the New England Council, but I will say this has been very, very informative, and you've given us an awful lot of information that I was not aware of that was in the stimulus package. So I just want to thank you for your hard work on that, but also for your advocacy and making sure a lot of those good items were inserted into the stimulus package. It didn't happen by accident. A lot of hard work, and it paid off. And I think the people should be very pleased with the quality of the work that you and your colleagues have done.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, and you know, you are making it possible for us to have a sense of community, Jim. You know, that's what New England Council is. It's no longer in person. It's virtual. It's online, but it's just as real. And I thank you for that. We're Massachusetts. We're the Bay State. We're the ones that have to show how we can bend the curve and come out of this at the other end more quickly than other places. We're being hard hit right now, but the more that we stick together, the more that we bend this curve, is the quicker we come out of it. And then we will be showing the rest of the country how you do this, how you recover. So my goal is to make sure you get the resources you need, whether it be a small business or an individual. Again, we protected gig workers as part of this bill. They can qualify for the first time for unemployment insurance. We have to look at the totality of the Massachusetts economy as it exists today. That's what we tried to do, from gig workers to fishermen to small businesses, minority, women-owned businesses. We have to make sure everyone is on this life raft and comes out on the other end. And we have to do it together. And if we do it, and then we ultimately find the vaccine, then we can look back on this and say that Massachusetts weathered this storm, and they did so in a way which they came out of this with their recovery more quickly than any other part of the nation. I want to be partnering with you in trying to accomplish that. And if any of you have any ideas as to what should go into the next stimulus package, or if you need any help in navigating the package as it exists right now, or the interim package that we may be passing in the next few days, please call my office or go through Jim, and I would be more than willing to help. But I'm proud of all of you, and please protect your families. By doing that, we protect everyone else's families. Thank you, Jim, and thank you all for being on this call.
Well, thank you, Senator. And to all of the members of the New England Council who are still on the line, let me just say, hopefully you'll have a healthy and a very safe Easter and Passover. And remember that no storm lasts forever. Hold on, be brave, stay safe, and look after your neighbor. And with that, thank you very much. We look forward to having you back, all of the members of the New England Council, on Monday for Congresswoman Lori Trahan. Again, thanks for taking the time for being with us this morning.